Welcome to the Semper AI Digest. I'm Tomas, your AI research lead, always scanning the horizon for what's next.
And I'm Aiva. Together we keep you sharp, informed, and ahead of the curve.
Let's get into it. All right, buckle up everyone, because today we're talking about what might be the most ambitious creative AI tool ever built. I'm talking about Grok's new Imagine Agent mode, which just collapsed your entire creative workflow into one infinite canvas. I'm Tomas.
And I'm Aiva. We're also diving deep into some major developer conferences coming up, including Anthropic's Code with Claude event next week. And honestly, the timing feels intentional with all these companies making big moves right now.
Plus, we've got some fascinating behind-the-scenes looks at how these AI companies are actually performing. OpenAI just dropped some revenue numbers that'll make your head spin, and Google's getting the community involved in building their I/O keynote countdown. It's Monday, May 4th, and this is Semper AI Digest.
Let's start with that Grok announcement, because honestly, when I first read your entire creative workflow just collapsed into one infinite canvas, I thought it was typical Silicon Valley hyperbole. But then I actually looked at what they built.
Right? So Imagine Agent mode is essentially Grok saying, what if you never had to leave one interface ever again? You can brainstorm ideas, write content, generate images, edit those images, and then turn them into videos, all on one endless canvas. It's like if Figma, ChatGPT, Midjourney, and a video editor had a baby.
The key word there being infinite canvas. That's not just a design choice. It's almost philosophical, right? Most creative tools force you into these rigid workflows where you have to export from one app, import to another, lose context, start over.
Exactly. Think about how fragmented creative work usually is. You brainstorm in one app, maybe Google Docs or Notion, then you generate images in Midjourney or DALL-E, then you edit them in Photoshop, then you create videos in Premiere or Final Cut. Each transition breaks your flow and you lose that creative momentum.
And context, that's huge. When you jump between tools, the AI doesn't know what you were thinking 3 steps ago. But if everything's happening on one canvas, Grok can see your entire creative journey and actually build on previous ideas.
The demo they showed was pretty compelling too. Someone started with just a rough concept, brainstormed it into a full narrative, generated characters and scenes, then turned it into a cohesive video story, all without leaving the page. That's genuinely impressive.
What I'm curious about is how this performs in practice, though, because infinite canvases can become infinite messes pretty quickly. Anyone who's used Miro or Figma for a complex project knows that organization becomes critical.
That's such a good point. I'm imagining someone 3 hours into a creative session with images and text and video scattered across this massive canvas, and suddenly they can't find anything. Does Grok have smart organization? Can it automatically group related content?
Right. And what about collaboration? If this is supposed to replace entire workflows, teams need to be able to work together on these canvases. The announcement doesn't mention multiplayer support, which feels like a pretty significant oversight.
Although, and I'm just thinking out loud here, maybe they're starting with individual creators intentionally? Get the core experience right before adding the complexity of real-time collaboration?
That would make sense. Speaking of companies taking measured approaches to big launches, Anthropic just announced that Code with Claude is returning next week. And honestly, I love how they're positioning this.
Oh, this is interesting timing. So Code with Claude is their developer conference, and they're explicitly saying, whether you're just getting started with Claude Code or you've been building for a while, there's a session for you. That feels very deliberate.
What strikes me is that Anthropic seems to be doubling down on developers at exactly the moment when other companies are going more consumer-focused. Like, we just talked about Grok's creative tools. Google's doing this community countdown thing for I/O.
And Anthropic's like, hey developers, we see you, we're building specifically for you, which is smart because developers are the ones actually integrating these models into real products. They're the multiplier effect.
Exactly. And Code with Claude isn't just about coding, right? It's about building applications, solving real problems, creating value. Developers are the bridge between these powerful models and actual user impact.
I'm really curious what they're going to announce at this conference because Claude 3.5 Sonnet is already incredibly strong at coding. Are we talking about new coding-specific models, better integration tools, more context window for handling larger code bases?
Or maybe it's about making Claude more accessible to developers who aren't working at big tech companies, like better pricing models, easier deployment, more flexible APIs?
That would be huge, because right now, if you're a small startup or an indie developer, the costs of using these advanced models can add up really quickly. If Anthropic can solve that problem,
they could end up with a really loyal developer base. And honestly, developer loyalty is incredibly valuable in this space. Once someone builds their workflow around your tools, switching costs become enormous.
Speaking of building workflows, let's talk about what Google's doing with their I/O keynote countdown, because this is actually pretty clever community engagement.
So they're asking people to use Gemini Canvas or AI Studio to create interactive number displays from 1 to 10, and they want to feature community creations in their actual keynote countdown. No developer experience required.
This is marketing genius, right? They're getting thousands of people to actively use their tools, create content that showcases the capabilities, and build excitement for I/O, all while sourcing actual creative material for their event.
And the no developer experience required part is key. They're specifically highlighting that you can vibe code these creations. That's such a perfect term for what Gemini Canvas enables. You describe what you want and it figures out the implementation.
I love that they're being specific about the constraints too. Numbers 1 through 10, use Canvas or AI Studio, submissions due May 6th. It's focused enough that people know exactly what to create, but open enough to allow for real creativity.
Although I have to ask, how are they going to handle quality control? Because if thousands of people submit countdown animations, someone has to review all of those and pick the best ones. That's a lot of human work.
Maybe that's part of the point though. Getting their team to see how people are actually using these tools in the wild, like built-in user research disguised as a contest.
That's actually brilliant if that's what they're doing, because the gap between how companies think their tools will be used and how they actually get used is often enormous.
And speaking of how tools actually perform versus expectations, OpenAI just shared some pretty incredible numbers about GPT 5.5's launch.
These numbers are wild. They're saying API revenue is growing more than 2 times faster than any prior release, and their Codex product doubled revenue in under 7 days. That's not just adoption, that's explosive adoption.
What's interesting is that they specifically called out Codex doubling revenue, because Codex is their coding-focused offering, right? So this suggests that the coding improvements in GPT 5.5 are genuinely substantial.
Which ties back to what we were saying about Anthropic's Code with Claude conference. The coding use case is clearly becoming a major battleground for these companies.
And when OpenAI says this is their strongest model launch yet, they have actual revenue data to back that up. It's not just about benchmarks or demos, it's about people paying money to use the thing.
That's the ultimate validation, right? Especially for API revenue, because those are typically businesses integrating the model into their own products. So when that revenue doubles in a week, it means companies are rapidly shifting their infrastructure to use the new model.
Which suggests the performance improvements are significant enough to justify the switching costs. Because moving from one model to another in a production system isn't trivial. You have to retest everything, update prompts, potentially retrain workflows.
Right. So for companies to move that quickly, GPT 5.5 must be delivering substantial improvements, whether that's better accuracy, faster inference, lower costs, or some combination.
We should also mention that Sam Altman posted something pretty heartfelt about Greg Rockman, saying it's impossible to imagine OpenAI succeeding without Greg. That feels significant given all the leadership changes they've had.
That does feel like Altman making a public statement about team stability and giving credit where credit is due, especially with Greg being one of the co-founders and having been there through all the major transitions.
And in a space where talent is so mobile and valuable, public recognition like that matters. It's both a message to Greg and a message to the rest of the team about how leadership values long-term contributors.
Let's shift gears and talk about some of the research and development stuff that's been happening. OpenAI's alignment team has been posting a bunch of new research results, and Google DeepMind published something really interesting about AI for scientific progress.
The DeepMind piece is fascinating because they're not just talking about their own research. They're doing what they call an AI data stocktake to help the entire field move faster on problems like nuclear fusion.
So they're essentially saying, here are the main AI opportunities in fusion research, here are the data obstacles that are slowing everyone down, and here are our recommendations for how policymakers and funders can address those obstacles.
That's remarkably collaborative for a competitive space. They're literally giving away strategic insights about how to accelerate scientific progress using AI, and they're positioning this as a blueprint that can be applied to other scientific domains too.
Which makes sense when you think about it from first principles. Like, if the goal is actually solving humanity's biggest challenges, then hoarding knowledge about how to do that effectively is counterproductive.
Plus, if AI is going to help solve problems like clean energy, having more researchers working on those problems with better tools and better data probably benefits everyone, including DeepMind.
It's almost like they're thinking about the positive sum nature of scientific progress. The faster the field moves, the more opportunities there are for everyone to contribute meaningfully.
And the nuclear fusion focus is perfect because it's such a clear example of a problem that affects everyone. Clean energy isn't a zero-sum game. If someone figures out practical fusion, that's good for literally everyone on the planet.
Speaking of practical applications, Google showed off another Canvas creation, this high-speed rhythm game where you tap to the beat and collect power-ups to remix the track, and they actually made it playable.
This is such a good example of what's possible when you lower the barriers to creation. Someone probably described a rhythm game concept to Gemini Canvas, and it generated not just the code, but a fully functional interactive game with music and visual effects.
What impressed me is that it's not just a simple demo. It has game mechanics like power-ups that actually change the music. That suggests Canvas can handle fairly complex interactive logic, not just static content.
And the fact that they made it publicly playable shows they're confident in the code quality, because if Canvas was generating buggy or poorly optimized code, they wouldn't want thousands of people actually trying to run it.
It's also smart marketing because people can immediately understand the capabilities by playing the game. It's much more compelling than just describing what Canvas can do.
Although I do wonder about the scalability of this approach. Like, if everyone starts using Canvas to generate games and apps, are we going to end up with a bunch of similar feeling experiences?
That's a really good question. Because these models are trained on existing code and design patterns, there might be a natural convergence towards certain solutions or aesthetics.
On the other hand, maybe the creativity comes from the human input, the concepts, the constraints, the specific requirements that people bring to these tools. The AI handles the implementation, but the vision is still distinctly human.
Right, and we might see new forms of creativity emerge that are specifically suited to AI collaboration. Like maybe people will get better at prompting for unique combinations or unexpected constraints that lead to genuinely novel results.
That's exciting to think about. We might be at the beginning of entirely new creative workflows that we can't even imagine yet.
Before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, this sense that all these announcements are happening in quick succession. Grok's new creative tools, Anthropic's developer conference, Google's community engagement for I/O, OpenAI's strong performance numbers.
It does feel coordinated, doesn't it? Like everyone's making their big moves at the same time, which could be coincidental, or it could be that we're approaching some kind of inflection point where the competition is really heating up.
And each company seems to be doubling down on their particular strengths. Anthropic focusing on developers, Google engaging their community, Grok going all in on creative workflows, OpenAI highlighting their performance metrics.
Rather than trying to be everything to everyone,